Welcome to Rule the World, the art and power of storytelling. Storytelling is what connects us as humans, and for brands, it is no different. A well-told story can effectively position your brand in the minds and hearts of your audience, and can convert thoughts and feelings into results and revenue. On this show, we dive into the unique and recurring principles of world-class storytellers from every walk of life, to help you level up your storytelling skills and knowledge to drive real, measurable results for you and your organization. Here's your host, Paul Furlong.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Rule the World, the art and power of storytelling. I'm your host, Paul Furlong, creative director at Opus Media, and today I'm delighted to introduce you to Robert McKee, one of my all-time heroes. Robert McKee is a world-renowned story authority and author. He's also a script and project consultant. He occupies a unique crossroads in modern media storytelling. His teachings have spread beyond the stage and screen to influence all story forms. Writers, producers, media professionals and business leaders from around the world read McKee's books and attend his sold-out international seminars for an exclusive deep dive into the narrative potential of their material. Since 1984, more than 100,000 students have taken McKee's courses in various cities around the world. Robert McKee's signature story seminars have been held around the globe, helping screenwriters, TV writers, novelists, playwrights, directors, producers, and actors master the principles of story. With his distinctive blend of award-winning scholarship, professional acting and directing experience, and craft knowledge across all media, McKee helps writers think beyond formula and take the best story decisions of their career. McKee's former students include over 60 Academy Award winners, 200 Academy Award nominees, 200 Emmy Award winners, and 1,000 Emmy Award nominees, as well as 100 Writers Guild of America Award winners, 250 Writers Guild of America Award nominees, 50 Directors Guild of America Award winners, and 100 nominees. McKee continues to be a project consultant to major film and television production companies such as 20th Century Fox, Disney, Paramount, and MTV. In addition, Pixar, ABC, BBC, Disney, Miramax, PBS, Nickelodeon, Paramount, Globostat, Mnet, and other international TV and film companies regularly send their entire creative and writing staffs to his lectures. Robert's currently working on a new book called Storynomics, and his current book, Dialogue, The Art of Verbal Action for Page, Stage and Screen, follows on from his very successful book, Story. He has a number of autumn seminars upcoming in Los Angeles, New York and London, and for those of you in the UK, the dates are the Storynomics seminar on the 9th of November, the 3-day story seminar the 10th to the 12th of November, and the 1-day TV day on the 13th of November. So without further ado, please enjoy our conversation with Robert McKee. Well, hi Robert, welcome to the show. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. I've been really looking forward to this.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
So can we start off with you tell me a little bit about yourself and where your passion for story comes from?
It's as old as, as time. Well, when I was, if you really want to hear this kind of story, but ever since I was a kid, I've been, like so many, absorbed in stories. And when I was, 7, 8, 9 years old, my father had a unique form of punishment. Instead of writing 100 times, I will not leave the refrigerator door open or whatever, sort of conventional punishment, he had this magnificent illustrated book of Aesop's fables. And when I did something wrong, the so-called punishment was to copy out the fable on paper in very, very good penmanship and the moral of the fable. And then I had to write my interpretation of the fable in addition to the given interpretation in the book. And it forced me to think about stories and what they mean and how they mean. And it was a way, if I was good at it, I could really impress my dad, as I would give him my interpretation. And that was a beginning of a fascination, not only with stories as a audience to stories, But then thinking and reflecting upon story and asking, how did the writer do what they did? How does this effect actually work? And if it didn't work, why not? And so forth. And so since I was a little kid, I've always had this fascination with love of great storytelling as an audience where I just sit like a child. And then I shift into another mode where I think about what I've read and try to understand how this particular piece works, its effects. And so I've been doing it, as I said, for almost, 70 years.
Wow. Do you think you could give us a definition of story?
Oh, sure. That's not difficult. It's a series of causally related events that change the value charge in a character's life. So basically, what any story says, from children's stories to myths to Hamlet, is how and why life changes. And the hows are created by characters making decisions and taking actions against various negative antagonistic forces in their life. And the outcome is that, for better or worse, with or without irony, their life undergoes change. And that change is expressed in terms of the core value at stake in the story. And so a story, for example, a love story, if it's a true love story, the core value obviously is love-hate, togetherness versus separation. In an action story, it's life-death, maybe justice, injustice, or in a very deep novelistic story, it might be a meaningful life versus a meaningless life. But the life will change over the course of the story in terms of the core value at stake in it and other supplementary values. But that's how you know that something has changed. It has to have a value attached to it, a dynamic value that can move from positive to negative, back to positive, negative, positive, negative. If there's no value attached, then it isn't change, it's just an activity. It's not a true action. And so it's simple. I mean, but that's like saying music is simple. I mean, it is. It's just 12 notes on a scale. But those 12 notes conspire into everything and anything we've ever called music. And so story is simple. It's a concatenation of causally connected events that bring about change in the value charge of a character's life. Fine, simple, but try to do it. That's another thing.
So the change part of it is the thing that separates a story from a narrative. Is that right?
Yeah, narratives. These two words, unfortunately, the academic world conflates narrative and story. In fact, they prefer the term narrative because it's got more syllables, and it sounds, intelligent. Whereas story, could be a children's story, and it's a kind of a simple term that they want to dismiss, and so they prefer narrative. But by doing that, they commit a categorical error, because all stories are narratives, of course, but not all narratives are stories. And so, for example, an automobile going down the assembly line, being pieced together piece by piece, coming out an automobile at the end, is not a story, it's a narrative of and then. There is change. I mean, parts become an automobile, but there's no real value attached to it. It's not as if this was a human being whose mind was shattered and then assembled at the end of the day. That could be a powerful story. And so narrative is a soft term, and as a result, in business, people will, departments in one company will be told to tell the story of, okay? and they will come up with a narrative, and then, or a list, this plus this plus this plus this plus that, therefore, whatever. And it's a narrative, it's not a story. And so when they present it to people, it has no impact. And then they wonder why. I mean, I told a story, they think, you see. It's a story. Why doesn't it have impact? And what they don't realize is, no, it's not a story, it's a narrative. And therefore, it doesn't hook anybody's real interest. It doesn't arouse any suspense or curiosity about the outcome. It doesn't involve them empathetically in the life of the character. They really don't care one way or the other about the outcome. And so it is disinteresting. And if they understood the difference between narrative and story, it would save them from doing and then. And that's the way children tell stories. You ever listen to a child tell a story?
Mm-hmm.
They tell you a narrative. They go, I saw 10 pounds on my mummy's dresser, and then I took it, and then I went to the candy store, and then I tried to buy some candy, and then the man wouldn't sell it to me, and then he made me stand there, and then he made a phone call, and then my mummy came, and then she gave me a spanking. That's how children tell stories. And then. If that kid is going to grow up to be a storyteller, he learns not to do that. Start somewhere else. My mother, the bitch, kicked my ass for no reason. Okay? So you hook their attention and you make them want to know, how will this turn out? How and why did your mother do that, right? And so there's a huge categorical difference between narratives and stories. And unfortunately, in the business world, there's very little understanding of the difference between them.
So is that where the emotional connection is added in to connect emotionally with the audience? Is that how the difference is established? A narrative doesn't bring any...
No. Narrative rarely evokes any kind of empathy. Story does. But then there are stories that don't evoke empathy either. And so empathy is yes, it's an essential part of fine storytelling, but it doesn't necessarily make the key difference between a narrative and a story. What makes the key difference is that there's got to be value charge change. The events have to move the core character from positive to negative, it has to be dynamic, positive, negative, and it has to be an open situation such that there's intellectual curiosity. The famous question, how will this turn out? And so you have to hook their curiosity first. You have to throw life for this character out of balance. And when they try to restore the balance, forces of negative forces arise up in their life and prevent them from reestablishing the balance, and provokes then in the audience, how will this turn out? So that's the intellectual connection. That's foremost. Then there's an emotional connection. That character who's undergoing the struggle to try to put life back into balance has to have some human quality that allows the audience to react to this character. And most of this is subconscious, you understand. The audience reacts to the character with a subconscious sense that this character is a human being like me. They recognize a shared humanity in this character. Because without that recognition, it's only curiosity. How will this turn out? Once they're in empathy, once they recognize the humanity of this character in some certain positively charged way, then they identify with that character. And so the story happens in the audience as if it were happening to them, because they made an identification with that character. Now, naturally, they have an emotional stake in this story, because it's as if it were happening to them. And when you add curiosity to empathy, you get suspense. Suspense is emotional curiosity. And so you have to have both. But if an audience, for example, if an audience were to recognize a shared humanity in a character and then nothing is happening in their life to jeopardize it, they have no interest. And so empathy, yes, is essential for a full effect, but it begins with curiosity. Because if they're not curious about the outcome, no matter how much they might identify with the character, the story's boring. So you need both curiosity, empathy, and as I said, when they merge, you have suspense.
So what's your approach when you're starting to plan a story? How do you tend to structure a story, or is it different depending on the story that you're telling?
Well, it would depend enormously on a myriad of factors. First of all, the setting. Only certain stories can take place in certain locations. It would depend even more so on the nature of the characters. The core character and the cast design of any one or ones that are surrounding this character. And most importantly, beyond that, it would depend on the value at stake. Because the value at stake is going to have a determination of what my genre is. And so if I'm writing, for example, I might be writing a business story, and the value at stake in the story would be success versus failure. And once I understand that this is about a company, that the setting is the modern world, and that what's at stake is survival or death, success or failure for the company, when I have those answers in hand, that, of course, is extremely determinant of what kind of story I tell. It doesn't eliminate the need for imagination and great creativity, but it shapes it when I know what I'm, and then I have to what those pieces are. But before I can tell the story, I have to see it from the consumer's point of view. I mean, who is the audience for this story? And what does the storyteller want that audience to do as a result of experiencing that story? Because in my Storynomics lectures, we tell what's called the purpose-told story. And we teach how to tell a story that, yes, it hooks interest, it holds interest, and it pays it off, it entertains in that sense. I mean, entertainment simply is, making time vanish. And so, you're entertaining by holding their attention and satisfying it. But you have to do more than a fiction story. You have to then move that audience to buy a product, hire a service, or if it's a branding story, simply, and it's not so simple actually, but to shape the attitude of the audience toward the company. I mean, branding is simply a process of changing attitude in the world from indifference or ignorance, even antipathy, to empathy and respect and admiration for the brand. And so knowing that I want that audience to make a purchase, or to change their attitude to the positive or whatever, knowing all that, once again, has tremendous effect on the story that I tell, starring this company in success, failure, and so forth. And so there's a whole checklist of understandings that I have to have about the nature of the story, the purpose of it, the value at stake, and so forth, that are going to shape and determine the story that I tell. And so it's not like fiction. It's not like you just open up your imagination and anything that drifts in that you find interesting, you start to play with. In the business story, It is purpose told. And so there are certain strong determinants that you have to answer and know before you can begin to try to figure out, given all this, what story do I tell?
And then when the brand is then telling the story that they've come up with, I often hear companies talk about finding their voice, finding the company's voice or their personality in the story. How does a storyteller or a company find their voice when telling their story?
Well, you first of all have to figure out who's talking before you can find a voice. I mean, you have a choice in the business story as to who is the core character, with whom is it about whom is this story told, and with whom do you want the audience to empathize? And you have three choices. You can star the company itself, or you can star the product that the company makes or the service that it performs, or you can star the audience itself. And there's a tremendous effort in the world today to be consumer-centric and to tell your story starring the consumer, not the company, not the product. But that's not always possible. There are certain times when it's really effective, more effective, to star the company, to make that the core character, or the product, make that the core character, and find some way to personify that product. And so you got to make a decision as to who is the core character of this story. If the core character is the company, and if you are trying to then create empathy for a corporation, you're up against some very powerful negative forces in the world, because the attitude in the world today is not very generous toward corporations. And therefore, making a corporation stand in for as a core character and empathetic and make the audience concerned about what this company is struggling to do, it takes some genius, to say the least. But it's done. It's been done many times, and the best of them know how to do this. But usually the product or the consumer is the first choice is the consumer. Second choice is probably the product or service. The third choice is the corporation. But as I said, there are times when those second and third choices are exactly the choice you should make, and you have to know when that is. And then you've got to find empathy. And getting an audience to empathize with a company or even a product is not easy. They can, and when I mean empathy, I don't mean likable. I don't mean sympathetic. It's not enough just to make a product or a company sympathetic, nice, charming, friendly, or whatever. They have to have a powerful story. The audience has to identify. They have to think the thought that corporation is human, just like me. And as you can tell, which is making that statement, the test that would be for any storyteller.
And you've talked in the past about mistakes that companies make when they're telling stories, and the biggest one that seems to come back time and time again is shying away from negative.
There's two big choices. One is being absolutely attracted to the positive. And so that becomes bragging. We're the biggest, we're the best, we're the shiniest, we're the newest, bragging and promising. We'll do this for you, we'll do that for you, etc. You're going to be thrilled with our product. Audiences today are extremely skeptical about bragging and promising, because after well over a century of massive advertising, people know that these braggings and promises almost never work out quite the way that they promise. But brands love to puff their chest out and brag a lot and promise a lot. That's one mistake. The other mistake is that they, as you said, they're caught up in what we call negaphobia, the fear of all things negative. And so everything in the story is positive, 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 positive. As a result, it's not a story, it's a narrative. Stories move positive, negative, because the negative forces in life is what brings a story to life. I mean, if a character just gets what they want, gets what they want, gets what they want, and finally gets what they really want, it's boring as it can be, and it's not a metaphor for life. Because we know in life there are always powerful antagonistic forces preventing us from getting what we want out of life. And so when you simply have no negative floor in a story, when it never moves toward the negative, the audience recognizes that this is Pollyanna, this is just, PR, and it's not a true story, and so they can't get involved because it doesn't reflect life as they experience it. And so overemphasis of the positive, bragging and promising, absolutely avoiding and ignoring the positive dynamic of life. Those are the two mistakes you get, and it becomes propaganda. It's a lie that a company tells about itself, and in the past, those lies were more or less accepted. Not anymore. The millennial generation and the Generation Z that's coming up behind it are so cynical because they have seen all this stuff so many times, and they don't believe a word of it. But if you tell a story, if you tell it dynamically and you move it to the negative, back to the positive, negative again, and then end on the positive, you can engage their interest and hold it and move them and be effective, but not unless you tell a story. And the energy of story comes from the negative side of life. And if a storyteller doesn't get that, then the story that they tell will be pablum, and people will not just ignore it, but the young audience today laughs at it.
So I'd love to ask you just a few quick fire questions to finish off with, Robert, if that's okay. So to your mind, who is the greatest storyteller of all time and why?
I don't answer questions like that because they just, who the hell knows? There's 1,000 possible answers, and it's all, and at a certain level of greatness, it's, from Charles Dickens to, Norman Mailer. I mean, how are you going to say one is better than the other? And so we just are grateful that there's all these great storytellers in the world, and that all these great stories have been recorded in print, so that we can act them out on the stage or read them in a novel or films that we can see, and that there are these great storytellers. But I don't ever think in those terms of lists and greatests, and it doesn't make any sense to me because there's so many. I mean, and the answer would be an apples and oranges thing. I mean, you talk about comedy writers versus dramatic writers. You understand? I mean, you can't compare Moliere and Shakespeare, and Shakespeare's a great comedy writer too, for that matter, and say one is greater than the other. That would not be true.
Fair enough. So the answer to my next question might be the same. I'm going to ask you if there's any great books, websites, podcasts, blogs about storytelling, obviously other than story and dialogue, which you've written. Any other good books that you could recommend to us?
No, I'm writing one.
Okay.
I hope it'll be good. The answer to that question, you see, questions like that, what's the best book about what, name it, right? The subject. Questions like that are designed to give the audience or give the questioner a shortcut in life. Read this one book and you'll know everything you need to know. Here is the definitive study of blah, blah, whatever the topic, okay? And this is what often people want. They don't want to work. They don't want to have to take what they do seriously and study it and come to their own personal understanding of these things. They want to be told, and they want a shortcut. They want it to be brief. One perfect book. And there is no such thing. And so my answer to the question is you read everything. Because, presuming that there's something in any of them, even if it's a terrible book about that subject, really stupid book about that subject, recognizing the stupidity of it, the mistakes in it, the blindness of it, is a step toward understanding. To be able to distinguish, what's of value, what's not of value. And so you read everything, and everything is a learning experience, if you let it, that sharpens your mind and defines how you understand things. And so, no, there is no perfect book. It won't be mine either. Therefore, you're going to have to study everything you can until you, and then do it yourself until you can master it.
I love that answer. That's a great answer. Thank you for being so honest with it as well. So where can we find out more about you then, Robert?
Well, I'm going to be in London on November 9th, doing the full day Storynomics lecture. And then, if you wish, beyond that, the story seminar, the big 3-day event from November 10 to November 12, is an immersion in the art of story. And then for some people that may be interested on November the 13th, and I think that's a Sunday, I'm going to do a full day on the long form television series. Because for fiction writers, this seems to me to be the most magnificent future of all, is creating the next Downton Abbey, creating the next Ray Donovan, the next Breaking Bad, the next Game of Thrones, creating one of these great long-form series with marvelously complex characters over season after season, that this is an exercise in creativity of a scope never attempted before in history. Nobody's ever written stories of this massive size before. And so Sunday the 13th, I do TV. And sort of all, it sort of builds up to that. The 3 days previous to that are the great long story seminar. I look forward to, if somebody's listening to this and chooses to do Storynomics on November 9 or comes to story starting on the 10th, step out of the crowd and introduce yourself and let me know that you found your way there thanks to this podcast, and I'll be pleased to meet you.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Robert. And where can we find you online?
McKeeStory1word.com, and all of the offerings will be there, and then they can pick and choose.
Brilliant. So they can find their way to your YouTube and your Twitter and your blog from there. All that. That's great, Robert. Well, really want to thank you for your time today and for the generosity with your knowledge.
Oh, my pleasure. Those are very good questions.
Thank you, and I'll look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Excellent. Take care now.
Thanks. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Rule the World. Be sure to rate, review and subscribe to the show, and visit weareopusmedia.com for more resources based on today's topic, as well as access to more episodes that will help you develop your storytelling abilities. That's weareopusmedia.com. Thank you, and see you next time.